31 seconds. That is how long Kash Patel sat completely still after Jasmine Crockett placed the resume on the table. Not his resume, the resume of every FBI director who had held the position before him. A single document, a side-by-side comparison. Names, credentials, years of federal law enforcement experience. And at the very bottom, one entry that stood apart from every other name on that list in a way that no amount of deflection could explain away. Crockett had been building this for 5 weeks, and Patel had no idea what was coming. Here is exactly what happened. The hearing had been running for over 2 hours. Republican members had praised Patel's transparency, his reform agenda, his commitment to rebuilding trust in federal law enforcement. Democratic members had pressed on the Epstein files, the terminated agents, the Maxwell transfer. Patel had handled every question the same way, polished, quick, the practiced fluency of someone who had spent years in Washington learning how to say nothing in as many words as possible. He leaned back in his chair. He smiled at a colleague. He checked his phone once. That was the last comfortable moment he would have in that room. Because Jasmine Crockett had been sitting at the far end of that committee table for the entire hearing with a single blue folder in front of her, closed. She hadn't opened it once. She hadn't asked a single question through 2 hours of testimony. She had simply sat there, watching, waiting for exactly the right moment. Crockett is a former criminal defense attorney from Texas. She spent years in courtrooms where preparation is not optional and where the difference between a good question and a great one is the evidence you have before you ask it. She doesn't perform for cameras. She builds cases, and she had been building this one for 5 weeks. At 3:22 p.m., the chairman recognized her. Crockett opened the folder. "Director Patel," she said, and her voice was measured, almost academic. "I want to talk to you about qualifications. Specifically, I want to walk you through the professional backgrounds of every FBI director who has held this position since the Bureau was established." Patel's expression stayed neutral. He had heard qualification questions before. He had his answer ready. "Before I ask you anything," Crockett continued, "I want to establish something for the record." She pulled out the first document and held it up so every camera in the room could see it. "This is a credential summary I had my staff prepare. It covers every Senate-confirmed FBI director in the Bureau's history. I want to read you some of what we found." She looked down at the page. J. Edgar Hoover joined the Justice Department in 1917. Built the Bureau from the ground up. William Webster, federal judge. United States Court of Appeals. William Sessions, federal judge. United States District Court. Louis Freeh, assistant United States attorney. Federal prosecutor. Robert Mueller, assistant attorney general. United States attorney. Decorated Marine Corps veteran. James Comey, deputy attorney general. United States attorney. Christopher Wray, assistant attorney general. Criminal division. Private practice federal defense. She set the document down. "Every single one of them, Director Patel. Every director who sat in the chair you are sitting in today. Federal prosecutors, federal judges, assistant attorneys general, people who had spent decades inside federal law enforcement before they ever walked into the J. Edgar Hoover Building as its director." She paused. "Now I want to talk about you." The room shifted. That particular stillness that settles over a hearing room when everyone present understands that the next few minutes are going to be different from everything that came before. Patel's right hand moved to the edge of the table. A small movement. Almost involuntary. "Before becoming FBI director," Crockett said, "you served as a congressional staffer on the House Intelligence Committee. You served in the Trump administration's National Security Council. You wrote a book. You appeared on podcasts. You ran a nonprofit." She looked up. "You have never prosecuted a federal case. You have never served as a federal judge. You have never led a federal law enforcement agency at any level. You have never managed a workforce of more than a few dozen people." She held up the credential summary again. "The FBI has approximately 35,000 employees. It has a budget of over $10 billion. It operates field offices in every major American city and legal attaché offices in over 60 countries. Director Patel, can you point to any position in your professional background that prepared you to manage an organization of that size and complexity?" 3 seconds of silence. Congresswoman, my background in national security, intelligence oversight, and government reform provides a unique perspective that. I didn't ask about perspective. Crockett's voice didn't rise. It simply became more precise. I asked about preparation, specifically management experience. Can you name one organization you have led with more than 100 employees? Patel stopped. 4 seconds. The work I did at the National Security Council involved coordination across multiple agencies, and coordination is not management. Crockett reached into the folder and produced a second document. This is an organizational chart of the National Security Council staff during your tenure. The NSC staff totaled approximately 400 people across all directorates. You served as Chief of Staff to the Acting Director of National Intelligence, a role that involved coordination functions, not direct supervisory authority over personnel. She set it down. You have never held a position with direct supervisory authority over more than a small team. You have never managed a budget in the billions. You have never led a law enforcement investigation of any kind at any level. She looked directly at Patel. Director Patel, I want to give you the opportunity to correct anything I have said. If there is a position in your background I have missed, a prosecution you led, an agency you managed, a law enforcement role I have not accounted for, I want you to tell this committee right now. 31 seconds of silence. Every camera in the room had repositioned. Every journalist in the gallery had stopped filing. A Republican member who had spent the morning praising Patel's qualifications was now studying something very carefully in his own notes. Because 31 seconds of silence from an FBI director when asked to name a single qualifying credential is not a pause. It is an answer, and everyone in that room understood exactly what kind of answer it was. Patel finally spoke. His voice had changed. The polished fluency was still there, but something underneath it had tightened. Congresswoman, I believe my record speaks for itself. The work I did holding the intelligence community accountable, exposing abuses of power, and advocating for reform. Your record, Crockett said, is exactly what I am asking about. And your record shows no federal prosecutions, no federal judgeship, no management of a federal law enforcement agency at any level, and no supervisory experience over a workforce of meaningful size. She picked up the credential summary one more time. Every director on this list had decades of federal law enforcement experience before they were confirmed. The average years of relevant experience for a confirmed FBI director is 22 years. You had 0. She set the document down flat on the desk. Director Patel, the men and women of the FBI, the 35,000 agents, analysts, and staff who put their careers and their safety on the line every day, they deserve a director who has earned the right to lead them, not someone who was given the job because of political loyalty. She folded her hands. I want to ask you one final question, and I want you to answer it directly, not with talking points, not with references to your reform agenda, directly. She looked at him. Do you believe you were the most qualified person available for this position? Yes or no? 14 seconds. Patel's jaw moved slightly. His hands pressed flat against the table. His senior attorney leaned forward almost imperceptibly. I believe I was selected because the President of the United States determined that I was the right person to lead the necessary reforms at. That is not what I asked. Crockett's voice was flat, final. I asked if you believe you were the most qualified. You cannot answer that question, because you know the answer. And so does everyone watching. She closed the folder. The record speaks for itself, Director. 0 federal prosecutions, 0 federal law enforcement leadership, 0 relevant management experience, and 31 seconds of silence when asked to name a single qualifying credential.